Listen, whether you've been streaming for a week, for a year, or for 10 years, it doesn't matter. It doesn't take much to make your Twitch stream look even more professional than it already does. In this video, I'm going to show you how to go from a complete beginner to professional grade Twitch streaming, all for the low price of, well, nothing. If you like what you see here, come follow me on Twitch, links in the description. Alright, so it's important to always choose the right tool for the job, right? So if you have any experience with another graphic design software such as Photoshop or Illustrator, Affinity Designer, GIMP, MS Paint, it doesn't matter. If you have experience with it, feel free to use that. I'm going to be using this free tool called Figma. This is mostly used for things like web and app design. I use it in my professional career all the time, but it has all the basic features that we need here, right? So we're going to be using this. You can use it inside of the browser if you want. You don't even have to download the desktop client like I have. You can do everything inside of your web browser. So I'll just go ahead, link in the description for this. Go sign up and follow along if you've never used anything else, right? So when you open it up, you're going to get to a screen just like this. You may have to click a new or whatever, but this is what the app looks like and what you'll see in your browser. Now I've pulled in a reference image here, right? So this is kind of similar to what you've probably seen before as far as Twitch designs go. A webcam border, maybe an intermission screen, some other scenes here, some alerts, a couple of panels, and maybe like a banner like this, right? So we're gonna start with this camera border. We're gonna make something similar to this. And then the techniques that we use for this, you can use to create all of these other different things. And so I'll go over that and kind of guide you through that process. So to start with, we're going to grab this frame tool by clicking on it or using the keyboard shortcut of F. Just click once. So if you've never used this before, a frame is basically like an artboard. If you've used anything that uses artboards, like Illustrator. And if you've never used any of those things, then don't worry about it, right? So we're gonna make this 1080p, so the width is gonna be 1920 and the height will be 1080. And so I'll zoom out just a little bit here. And so this is our artboard, right? So we need to start with that camera border. So I'll grab my rectangle tool, I'll click one more time. We're gonna make this 1280 by 720 because that's all you really need for a webcam border like this. So we don't want it to be a solid rectangle, right? We want it to have just an outline. So we're going to take out the fill and add a stroke. We're going to beef this up to about 20. Make it nice and thick, and we're going to make this be along the center. So you can kind of see this blue line if I hover over it. If I have it on the inside, it's on the inside of that line, outside of that line. We want it just on the center. This doesn't make that big of an impact, but that's what I like to do. So if we remember that reference image, it kind of had some different colors of black and gray going along to give this a little bit more texture and depth. And we can accomplish that same look by changing this from a solid fill to a diamond fill. So we're going to grab this first and we're just going to bring this opacity all the way up. And then just so you can see what's happening here, let me go ahead and make this like a bright yellow, right? And so I can drag this along this line and you can see the black starting to come into play, right? So maybe we want our black to be something like that. So we probably really want this to be reversed, right? So instead of this bright yellow, and you can see the diamond over here on the side as well, but instead of this yellow, let's go ahead and get a very dark gray, not solid black, right, but a dark gray. And then we're gonna bring the second color up into the grays just a little bit. We don't want it to be too white or too light. We still want it to be dark, but enough to give us that texture that we're looking for. Something like that will work well, right? And so then the next thing we need to do is give this a drop shadow, right? So if we click effects and the plus, it defaults to drop shadow, and this is not bad, but a little too small for something of this size. So we're gonna make the opacity come up maybe about 65%. And then the blur, we're gonna bring up to about 10. And let's try a Y of 10 as well. Okay, so that's a little bit too much. Let's go with 5 there. So there you go. You can kind of see the border for the webcam taking shape. There's a little bit of that gray coming through. It could probably stand to be a little bit lighter, but not too light, right? Something like that. So for the sake of organization, I'm going to rename this and call this border. So if we want to add that little area for some metrics down below the webcam, that's pretty easy to do as well. We just need to, again, get our rectangle tool. We'll click one time, and then I'm going to line this up with the center line of that rectangle we made to begin with, right? And then I'll just drag this over to good, let's say 1,000, right? That seems like a good size to me. And then we want to make this maybe 75 tall. So along that line, we'll center it up, and I want to bring that below the other rectangle to give it, again, a little bit of depth. And then for the fill color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just grab my eyedropper tool there, and I'm going to select a color from my border. And so already you can kind of see this is taking shape. The next thing I'm going to do is mimic the drop shadow here again. So we're going to go blur 10, Y of 5, and we'll bring this up to 65%. Okay, so we got a uniform drop shadow going all the way around. The next thing I want to do is grab another rectangle so that we can make one of the indents, right, that they had going. Let's say if the whole thing is 1,000, let's say this is 425 pixels wide. Okay, and then the height is going to be a little bit tricky here, maybe 45. Okay, so we're going to grab that. Let's make this fill be a little bit darker in the background. Something kind of like this. Next, we want to give it a stroke, but instead of it being dark like this, we want to grab that fill color again, and we want to bring it up just a little bit to kind of give it a little bit of depth. And we'll change that to be on the outside. And then the last thing we want to do to really get the illusion that this is an indentation is, instead of a drop shadow, we want to add an inner shadow. And you'll have to play around with these values depending on the size of yours, but I'm going to start with 5 and 5, and again maybe like a 65 there. And so I think that looks pretty good. So you got that there. If we zoom out, you can kind of see where that's taking shape, right? And it looks a little bit like an indentation. I'm going to bring this fill color down just a little bit more to really sell that this is an indentation. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to give it some rounded corners. So if we come up here, you can see this corner radius. If we make this say 10, we get those rounded edges that we're looking for. So this is really coming along here, right? Let's add ourselves some sort of icon, right? So we'll just move that over, and we'll come up here, and let's say we want to add a star. Again, we'll click this, and let's say we want this to be, let's try 40 by 40. We want it to be nice and square. Let's see how that looks. So we'll center this up like that. And again, instead of a solid fill, let's go with a linear gradient this time. So let's make ourselves a red star. So we'll do something kind of a light red like this for that one. Let's bring this opacity all the way up. and then we want to get a nice dark red for this side. And so already that's looking pretty good. Let's again add a stroke to the outside. And we want this to be again kind of like a dark red, just to really kind of show that this is different from that background. And the last thing is we want to add a drop shadow. We don't want it to be that big though, so let's go with something like 2 and 2. Bring this up to maybe 60%. Let's bring that blur up again as well to maybe something like 5. And we could actually go ahead and just take away that, not 9, take away that Y value so that it sits directly underneath the star. I think that blurs a bit too much. Let's go back down to 5. The stroke could be a little bit darker. Maybe we bring down the opacity on that stroke. Right. Okay, so you can see how that's coming along. Let's move this in just a little bit and then bring this shape over. So we've got 1/2 of it done. I'm just going to grab this, Control D to duplicate it. And then for the star, or for the icon on the other side, let's say we want to do just a polygon. We'll do just a normal triangle again, right? So we'll click this this button here to lock the aspect ratio. And I'll just say I want it to be 40 by 40 to match the size of our star over there. And then instead of going through that whole coloring process again, we can click on our star here, click these 4 little circles, and we can hit this plus to create a style. We'll just call this red gradient and hit enter. So then now we can click on our triangle, again the 4 circles, and then here's our red gradient that we just came up with. So you can see that there. We'll still need to add a stroke and a drop shadow. We could go through this process again. We'll say red gradient, stroke, and the drop shadow. Oh, that's not one. Red gradient, drop shadow. And so then over here, click this, red gradient, drop shadow, red gradient, drop shadow, or stroke, I'm sorry. And so then we can look at our margins here just to see how these things are spaced apart. So these two are 9 apart, but these two are 16 apart. So we will grab this and we will say 16 to space those out. And then we can grab all of these. You can see that we have not the same here as far as margins go. So if we do 16 there, everything now is 16 margin apart, and it should be, if we select all those, we can center them there. So now you can see this webcam border is really taking shape. And the last thing I want to do is add the shapes that they had on the sides. So this is pretty easy to do. I'll just click once on the center of my line here, and then I'll hold shift. I'll go out as far as I want to go out with this shape, maybe somewhere like there. I'll continue to hold shift, go down as long as I want it to be, and then we'll click again in the middle there, still holding shift, and we'll come back up. So for the stroke, let's just do that same, or I'm sorry, for the fill, let's do that same red gradient. Well, this is actually not going to work because we can detach that now. Click here, and then we're going to want this to be, we're going to want to go out this direction. like so. So we'll do something kind of like this, right? I think that looks pretty good. So then select this, put it underneath the border, right? Select that shape that we just made and the border, and hit the vertical align button there. Click on the vector shape that we just made. Control D to duplicate. We're gonna bring it over here, and then we're gonna rotate it so that it faces the other side. Put it back in the center, and there you go. Now you have your cam border all set up, ready to go. If you want to export this so that you can use it inside of OBS, just go ahead and hold shift and select all of these things, right? Right click, hit group selection, and then down here in the bottom right hand corner there's an export tab. You can click on that. You'll see a little preview here. If not, just hit the drop down, select PNG, and you'll just export this wherever you want it to go. I can put mine on my desktop, and we'll just call it tutorial border. We'll hit save, and there you go. Now you have a camera that is completely ready to go. It'll be a PNG, so you just have to drop it into OBS and you'll be good to go. So now let's say we want to make one of these panels, right? Because if we make one of these panels and we go over how to make these shapes, you can see they kind of use that on these screens here. This again, more pen tooling, more of those same rectangle shapes, icons, things like that. So you can kind of see where the things that we use to create this, where they're coming into play in these other things. So I'll zoom out, I'll grab my frame tool here, I'll click. So for my panels, I like to make them 640 pixels by 150 pixels. There's no reason really that I do that. I just find that's a good shape. I don't know if that's just what I make them. Again, we don't want this to be a solid black color. We want it to be like a dark gray. So we're going with something like that. And then next, let's make those shapes. So I'll click once, like right here, and then just a really exaggerated curve, right? I'll click on my point there, and then I will click somewhere like right here. And then once again, I'll click somewhere up here. Again, just going to really exaggerate this curve shape. I'll click back here, and then I'll just connect my points. We want this to be a fill, not a stroke, so we'll get rid of that. We'll click here, and we can actually use that red gradient from earlier. Next, because we clicked outside of the frame, it didn't actually put this on the frame. So let's just drag that onto the frame. And now, if we click here, you can see that this is, it's kind of clipped it off for us. We don't have to worry about that excess. I want to add a drop shadow to this. We're not going to get too particular about it. We'll just say Y5 and blur 5. Bring this up to about 50%. I think that looks pretty good. Let's make the blur just a little bit bigger, maybe like an 8. Okay. And so if you want to layer these on top of each other, let's actually detach this gradient so that we can bring it in and make this a little bit darker. Something kind of like this, right? So if you want to layer these on top of each other, it's pretty easy. Again, just select your shape, hit Control D, and then we can just move one a little bit, maybe give it a little rotation like that. If we wanted to add another shape, maybe underneath it, kind of like they had, that was kind of like a white color, we can try and mimic that angle a little bit, and then we can just come through and we can select all those. Again, get rid of the stroke, add in a fill. We're gonna go with a linear gradient. It's gonna be very basic, so we'll just make this not a true white, but very close, and that color's actually okay. So let's swap these around just by grabbing these handles. We'll make something kind of like this. So again, bring this underneath everything else on the frame. And now you can see we've got that layered polygon shape look that we were going for. I'll grab my text tool, I'll click, and we'll just say panel. Right? I'll hit escape. So then I can use my line tools here to get that nice and squared away. This, again, not a true white, but close. Bring it just down a little bit. And again, we'll add a drop shadow here, a nice big blur on this with a short Y, and bring that opacity up to about 50%. So there you have it. There is a panel and a face cam. If you want to export this panel, just select the entire frame here, frame 2, and again, export. You'll export it as a PNG, save it however you want to, and there you go. Hopefully by following along, you can see how we can use these same tactics and tools that we use to create these two assets into making all of the rest of these. Again, these are just pin tools, rectangles, text, a rectangle, rounded rectangle with another pin tool here. This little blur that they've done with this intermission screen, if you wanted to do that, all you need to do, I'll just take these things here, I'll Control G, Control D, and then I will hide the originals. So here is a copy, and all you need to do is hit Effect and go to Layer Blur, right? And even just that looks perfectly fine. So if you were doing this on a large scale, like they're doing here for this scene, you'll have that blurred background. So I hope that this tutorial was informative, and I hope that it helps you really bring some life and some new assets to your Twitch channel and to your Twitch stream. So if you liked this video, please give this video a like, share it with anyone that you know that is looking to create some really cool assets for their stream for free. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please come check me out on Twitch. Again, link is in the description, and I hope to see you in the next video in this series, where we go over how to make some animations and stinger transitions. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.